Hey folks, welcome to your week 2 video. Um, One of our discussions this week is the danger of a single story. So first thing first, watch Adichie's video. She makes a TED Talk, right, a speech, with this thesis that, the media, US, mainstream media, literature, um, often presents a single story, a single perspective, a single way of understanding groups. And I want to apply Adichie's really interesting thesis to our Intro to LGBTQ Studies, right? So apply her idea that sometimes the media gives us one way of looking at a subject, and that can create assumptions, right? So if I were writing this, right, I would watch Adichie and her brilliant ideas, and I would apply that to when I often think of how the media presents my community, the LGBTQ community, I often see it in terms of like the rejection of gay men and women from religious life, right? Catholic, Catholic, the Catholic Church, not allowing, gay Does that make sense? How the Methodist Church has been riven over this discussion of gay marriage, right? So it just seems to the story I see so often in the media is how many churches are rejecting, right? Still gay Americans. So for me, that's a single story being told. And I would counter that with, well, I have a friend who's a gay Sufi. I have, I'm a Buddhist, right? So like this idea that you can be religious and spiritual and gay, right? To be a gay male Sufi is huge. To be a woman Sufi is huge, right? So I I often see that single story about religion and LGBTQ life. That there's almost that those two things are at odds, and they're not, right? I see so many LGBTQ folks reclaiming religion, reclaiming spirituality, and telling another story, right? That you can't have a rich religious or spiritual experience and be gay, bisexual, right? Does that make sense? So that counters this single story that we often hear. So that's probably what I would write if I were doing this discussion this week about the single story, because I'm interfaith and I'm so interested in um, sort of connecting dots around gender, sexuality, and religion, right? Um, and indeed, a lot of our sources this week, right, bring religion into it too as part of culture. So that would I would use one of our textbook, right, chapter 2 this week as one of my sources. So that's all that discussion is asking us to do is, what maybe single story have you heard um, about the LGBTQ community, and how does our readings this week or another reading, right, or something that you've seen or heard sort of challenge that single story, right? This week's readings, we learn about third, fourth, fifth genders in many cultures, right? That definitely breaks the single story about, well, there's two genders, maybe three. Does that make sense? So it sort of shatters that stereotype or that assumption that there's two, maybe three. Well, no, there's a lot more, right? So there's many stories and many cultures and nations teach us that. And across wisdom traditions too, from Buddhism to Islam, right? Does that make sense? So there's so many sources that you can bring into play um, in this discussion this week. So take a look at that. That's the danger of a single story, right? I'm looking for about a page or two. You also have another discussion. Um, that discussion, think of that as more of a reading reflection, right? You have all of these rich concepts, history, and terms from chapter 2 this week. So I'm just sort of asking you to sort of break down um, and give your understanding, your take of what those terms are, right? Um, Question one is, there's a lot of terms in the glossary for chapter 2 this week. Take one of those terms that you're particularly specially interested in and do a little more research, right? Bring in an additional source, right? That can add something new or apply, right? Um, apply that term, right? So, my example this week was this idea of Danshi um, and gay men. I've also been looking at social media of gay Japanese husbands raising children, right? And so, like, I want to bring in that social media now. These posts of gay Japanese fatherhood, right? Raising children, right? And that shattered like a single story. Um, so that's what this question one is from our sort of reading analysis discussion, right? Take one of those terms that you're interested in, and just bring in another source that can help us apply it or understand it or make it new, right? Um, we already have some great discussion posts. And folks, I don't know if you know, in back in November, we had, I'll just sort of show you, we had, and this is one of our terms this week, we had a drag king, Sherwood Ryder, come. They were invited by the South Seattle Library, and for Dia de los Muertos, they did a they did a drag king story hour, right? I was there. It was a very small audience. It was like almost right before Thanksgiving. So I wish more people had gone. I think there was like almost 30 people there. It was brilliant. So if you missed this, stay on the lookout. I will let you know. I will let this class know if we have any more community events right on the horizon. But this was really cool, right? And I loved how it combined Dia de los Muertos, right? This amazing cultural event with Drag King Story Hour, right? And you all know, you folks know sort of the controversies sort of in other states swirling around, Drag Queen Story Hour, right? People are shutting libraries down over this. It's just so right? So it was just so refreshing to have right Drag King Story Hour at South Seattle just a few months back. So yeah, if you missed that, stay tuned, right? Our library is always surprising us, right? Our activities that we host are always surprising me. We have an artist as storyteller that brings in a lot of folks from the LGBTQ community too, right? That's artist as storyteller. I'll be sending out links to them. They're going to be having events soon. Yeah. So again, going back to our reading discussion, right? You've got 6 questions. And again, you're just responding to this week's reading. And folks, try to put this in your own words, right? You can definitely quote or paraphrase the readings, but I want you just to what does that mean to you? What is your understanding of that, right? So try to put the bulk of this in your language, right? I always say in my classes, if you can't say it in your own words, you don't really understand it, right? So try to filter it through your understanding, right? Your metaphors, your analogies, right? In your own words. Okay, so that's that. And again, we're looking at chapter 2 this week, right? You can find chapter 2 right under Getting Started under our course text, Introduction to LGBTQ Studies, or, I give us weekly links back to chapter 2, right? Right, so there it is. Okay, folks, email me if you have any questions. I'm really excited about this week. Yeah, and we have some great projects on the horizon. I think our first short essay will be designing a museum exhibit, right, that includes LGBTQ history for South Seattle, right? So our short papers will be sort of applied, right? They'll be more project-based, right? Let's apply some of these ideas and concepts in history to, this area. How can we use what we're learning to make an exhibit? What would you like to teach, right, others about that you've learned through an exhibit, right? Design that exhibit, right? That art exhibit here at South. Does that make sense? So that's where we're heading. So think of this as we're learning to use these ideas, and then I'm going to ask you to apply them in a week or two. Okay, folks. Thank you. Email me if you have any questions. Thank you.